Hello and welcome to another Autodesk Alias Subdivision tutorial. My name is Johan Wendesten and today I will show you how to model this Georg Jensen HK Pitcher. Enough chit chat, let's begin. First I need to import my reference images into Alias. So I go to the left view and then I choose File, Import and Canvas Image. And I make sure that Always Create New Canvas is enabled. Then I click Go and I choose my image. I want to lower the transparency, but not too much, since these images aren't that legible to begin with. So I think a value around 0.3 should be fine. The height of this 1.9 liter picture is 330 millimeters, so I create a distance locator with that same height. I snap the start point to the center and then I go up here to the command input where I type 0, 0 and 330, and this gives me the distance locator. I then snap the pivot to the bottom of the canvas image before I move it into place. And now I can hide the grid and scale it accordingly. Okay, almost there. Just a little more. And there we go. And now I can simply repeat this process for the rear view. I move the canvas images out of the way. And then I delete the locator since I don't need it anymore. And I create a layer which I name Image References. And I add the canvas images to that layer. I make it an actual reference layer and now I can no longer accidentally select them. I switch to the Subdiv workflow by going into Preferences, Workflow and Subdiv, or by simply pressing Ctrl 5 on my keyboard. I now have access to all the subdivision tools through the shelf and the marquee menus. And we can finally start modeling. For this I will start out with a cylinder which I snap to the center of the grid. And I need the resolution to be a bit higher than 8, since I am going to create an extrusion for the beak as well as the handle. So hopefully 16 spans will be fine. But there is no real way of knowing until we tried it. I switch views to the side view, where I pick vertices and move them into place. And before we continue any further, I think that we should talk some modeling theory. So let me select this cylinder and hide it for now. In order to mold my cylinder into the shape of the picture, I of course need to insert quite a few extra edge loops. But that begs the question, how many do I need and where do I insert them? The truth is that this is a question without a real answer. But let me share an analogy that hopefully can clear things up a little bit. So let's pretend that this line is a road and we're driving our car down that road. Okay, sorry for that. But every time we need to either pump the brakes, accelerate, or make a turn, that's where we insert an edge loop. So if we start from the beginning of the road, it's fairly straight and we can drive forward. But then we approach this curve and we need to decelerate. And this is where we insert our first edge loop. Then we reach the apex of the curve where we will need to turn, and this is the position for our second edge loop. As we approach the end of the curve, we can start to speed up again, and this is where we insert our third edge loop. And then we just continue down the road with this in mind, and here you see me pointing out where I will insert edge loops based on this principle. As we reach the end of the road, we come almost to a full stop, and in order to make the turn, we need to insert edge loops really close to each other, as you might remember if you watched the Place and Rocket tutorial. Okay, so that was a lot of talking, but now let's put this into practice and apply this strategy to our model. So I pick the Insert Edge Loop tool, and then I simply proceed to insert edge loops wherever I want them, based on this aforementioned mindset of mine. To insert an edge loop, just click an edge and then drag to position it where you want it. Whenever you're happy with the result, press spacebar to complete the action. I like to start out with as few edge loops as possible and add new ones only if I really need them. Okay, so I think I need one more edge loop just in between the bottom two ones. And then we're good to go. Then I pick all the top vertices and I press the R key on my keyboard to enter the scale tool. Now it's important that I use this red square to scale them only in the X direction. I move them slightly, and then I proceed with the next row. And the next, and so forth. So far I've only been taking the line on the left side into consideration. But to account for the line on the right side as well, I think I need to insert one extra edge loop right around here. After I've added the additional edge loop, I make use of the Transform CV Slide tool to even out the spacing between the loops without distorting the shape so much. And whenever I've added geometry, I need to go in afterwards and make modifications to the shape, so that it's what you see me doing here. Scaling and moving, just like before. Once I'm happy with the way it looks in the side view, I move over to the rear view, where I proceed to select and scale vertices, but this time in the Y direction instead of the X direction. And this is what we have so far. Not bad. But now we have to fill the hole at the bottom. So I pick Edge Loop to select all edges around the hole. And I click the Fill Hole button. And I want it to be set to single face. Now you see I have this 16-sided face, which I want to split into smaller pieces. So I cut from one side to the other, and then I cut perpendicular to the first cut. And I continue cutting until I end up with 4-sided faces only, or all quads, as we used to say. If I press one key on my keyboard to go into box mode, you will more clearly see what it's supposed to look like, and this is the way we want it to be. Now on this bottom surface in particular, it isn't really super necessary to maintain all quads, since it's totally flat and it's kind of hidden anyway, but I think it's a good habit to get into, and that's why I'm doing it. Compared to the picture in the image reference, ours is way too soft at the bottom. And as you might remember from the car analogy, a clean break means edge loops really close to each other. So that's why I'm inserting an extra edge loop here. And you'll see that this creates a crease line, just where we want it. And then, as always, whenever we add geometry, we need to make modifications. And that's what I'm doing here. With that, we are finished with the main volume. And next we will move on to the beak and the handle. I select the picture and I turn on the controls for it by pressing 4 on my keyboard. Now I want to select edges. So not edge loops, but edges. And I select these 4 edges. I click the Extrude tool button and I set it to global. Then I pull this blue arrow to extrude the edges. I make use of the Extrude tool manipulator to move, rotate and scale the edges into place. Then I proceed to move these vertices to make them match the line in the image reference. This too needs to be moved as well. And that applies to these ones as well, which I will move upwards. And when I'm happy with the way it looks in the side view, I go to the top view. The beak needs to be pointy, and the way to achieve that is by scaling these vertices in the Y direction. I'm happy with the way the beak looks for now, so I want to create the extrusion for the handle, while I'm selecting these 2 edges. And I simply make use of the Extrude tool once again. I pull the blue arrow, and then I go into the side view. Here I move everything into place, And then I continue to make extrusions by clicking this Extrude Again button. Or I can simply press the spacebar and it will make another extrusion for me. I rotate this and then extrude once again. And I will continue this process until I reach the end of the handle, or the end of the road if you will. With all the geometry finally in place, I need to move and select the vertices until our handle is matching the handle in the reference image, just like we did with the main volume of the picture. And here you see me once again making use of the Transform CV Slide tool, which is great for when you want to change the CV distribution, but not change the shape too much. And that's starting to look alright, at least in my eyes. Maybe these ones needs to be moved just a tiny bit. Now we need to work on the handle in the rear view as well. But as you can tell, the rear view is really cluttered with CV points and it's hard to tell what's going on. So what I would like to do is to separate the handle temporarily from the main volume, so I can work on it as an isolated geometry. You might have spotted me struggling with selecting all the faces I want for the handle, why I will be utilizing this little trick. So with the two bottom faces selected, I click this grow icon, which grows the selection for me, and I continue clicking this until I have all the faces that I need. To separate the handle from the rest of the beaker, I click the extract button, I make sure that keep original is off, and then I click go. Now I have two objects and I can easily hide the one I'm not interested in at the moment. And then it's just a matter of tracing the handle in the rear view as well. And this should be second nature to you by now. Now I want to combine the two objects back into one. And the first step of doing so is by snapping points to each other by holding Ctrl and using the Move tool. With the Weld tool set to tolerance, I then drag select over the vertices to weld them together and create one unified object. From looking at our model, it seems like we are on track so far. So now we will continue by adding some thickness. But before I do that, I would like to turn on the symmetry modifier. So I go to the palette and under Object Edit I choose Symmetric Modeling. And if I then switch to Shaded mode by pressing 3 on my keyboard, you'll see that the wireframe has turned green. And this shows that the symmetry modifier is enabled. Something that can be further demonstrated by me selecting and moving vertices on one side while it gets reflected on the opposite one. I use Pick Edge Loop to select all the border edges. And then I use the Extrude tool, and I set it to normal. And now I drag the green arrow to add some thickness to my model. So right around there should be fine. I'm double checking the model to make sure that everything looks the way it's supposed to, and then I press spacebar to complete the extrusion. I use Pick Edge to select this edge over here. Then I hold Shift and I middle mouse click on this edge, which selects all the edges in between. A change selection if you will. Now I once again use the Extrude tool, and I set it to global this time because I want to extrude in the Y direction, and I drag it far off to the side so that I can see what I'm doing. Then I'm simply scaling to line up all the vertices, and lastly I'm holding Alt to snap them to the center of the grid. I then activate the Weld tool, and with it set to tolerance, I drag select over all the vertices of the symmetry plane to weld them together. Last but not least, I need to cap off the handle, so I select the border edge loop and I click the fill hole tool. And here you can clearly see that I need to insert an extra edge loop to create a smaller corner radius. Okay, that didn't work, so let me try that once again. That's better. And I slide it up slightly. And that's looking the way I want it to. Then I pick the cut tool and I cut across to split the one hexagon into two four-sided faces. Now I can just move these slightly inwards to round off the corner a bit. I take the same approach to the beak, where I will insert one extra edge loop right around here where I want the corner radius to start. Let me then select these points and move them outward slightly to round off the corner. And I also would like to slide these down a bit. That looks decent. As you might have noticed when I tumbled the camera earlier, there's something going on with our model at the very bottom. And this is what I'm talking about. What has happened here is that I accidentally welded two vertices together. But luckily there's a simple way of fixing this. I got rid of the support edge loop, and now I can simply select all these vertices and scale them to flatten them. And then it's just a matter of reapplying the support edge loop. And we're back to square one, just where we want to be. Okay, so we're approaching the finish line for this model, and the only thing that remains now is to create the inside of the picture, the B surfaces if you will. As you can tell, I still have the symmetry modifier enabled, and to deactivate it, I simply select the object and I delete the history for it, and you see it goes away. I select the bottommost faces. And then I grow the selection until I have all the faces I need for the inside of the picture. I enter the extract tool and I make sure it's set to keep original. Then I click go. This gives me a duplicate set of faces which I now will use to create the inside of the picture. But since this object has a green wireframe color, that means that the symmetry modifier is enabled. So first of all I need to select the object and delete the history to get rid of that. I delete the bottom faces as well, because I've noticed that they tend to mess up my extrusions. Then I select all the faces and I click the extrude tool. I make sure it's set to normal. And I pull the blue arrow to create some thickness to the model. Then I pick face loop and I drag in the direction I want the loop to run. And I delete the faces. And I repeat this process for the faces at the top as well. And here I almost got ahead of myself, since before we can connect the inside and outside, we first need to fill the hole in the bottom of the inside. So let me isolate this once again. Turn on the controls, and then pick edge loop. And then I simply use the fill hole tool in conjunction with the cut tool to create the cap for the cylinder, just like we did before. And we mustn't forget to add the edge loop to create the crease line as well. Now it's time to join the two pieces. And for that I think it's easier to work on only one half of the model rather than using the symmetry modifier. And that's why I'm selecting half of the faces here and simply deleting them. Then I'm snapping points on top of each other by holding Ctrl while using the move tool. And this is a situation where I feel it's much easier to work in box mode, because there I can more easily see what I'm actually doing. I want to raise these 2 points up just a tiny bit, so I use the transform CB parallel and then I move them parallel to that edge. Now I select the edges and the edges on the opposite side. And I want to bridge them together, so I click the bridge tool icon and then the spacebar to complete the bridge. I want to fill this hole over here while maintaining four-sided faces while I'm inserting this edge loop. Then I pick this point and I snap it onto the next one. It might look like everything is put together, but it really isn't. Not until we made use of the weld tool to make sure to connect all the vertices together by drag selecting on top of them. And there we go. And here you can see me quickly assigning the picture to a new layer with symmetry on, so I can get a better sense of what it will look like when it's finished. I also noticed that I didn't trace the outer part of the handle correctly, so that I have to make up for here. Then let's get rid of the seam line. And if you watched any of my other videos, you know that the way to do that is by, first of all, creating geometry from the layer. So go to Layer, Symmetry, and create geometry. Then we want to combine these two objects into one by using the Weld tool. I set it to a small tolerance, and then I drag select across all the vertices of the symmetry plane. And this combines the two pieces into one. For some reason, it also gives me these extra template surfaces, which I get rid of. But before I go, I would like to do some final adjustments to the beak. So I turn on the symmetry, and then I model away. And the same goes for the handle, where I mainly need to round it off and add some crown to it. Last but not least, we need to add some definition to this very round edge by inserting an edge loop roughly in the center. And there you have it. Our picture is finished. So, thank you for watching and see you in the next video.